Talking about Falcons, NFL free agency here on Sports Talk ATL. We talked about Leonard Floyd. We talked about the pass rush. We talked about the linebacking core. They also made addition, or I guess re-signed, made the addition of Mike Hughes, bringing him back. And we talked about this before free agency as a no-brainer. 3 years, $18 million, not a big contract. Pretty excited about this. Obviously, there's a chance that he regresses back to the player that he was last year, and that's the thing you got to take. But the Falcons aren't going to have big money to go out there and spend. It's the bird. It's the thing, That's what Mike Hughes is. He was the one consistent player AJ Terrell's had across from him for an entire season. And I thought he was a damn good corner. Definitely a damn good number 2 corner, way better than we expected. And at 3 years, $18 million deal, you can't really find a better bargain than that for a number 2 corner.
Yeah, I mean, talking about starting money versus not starting money in terms of, Diablo's getting $7 million a year. You don't want $7 million sitting on the bench. $6 million for a starting cornerback is unheard of. Unheard of. That is the going rate of a guy that's like your 4th cornerback who, most likely will get some burn, but you're really just trying to solidify the depth. And that would be good and all if that's what Mike Hughes is, but he's not. He's going to be the starter opposite AJ Terrell is what I would assume, unless that guy is found in the draft, and that could be possible as well. I think the Falcons are doing what they always do. They're kind of setting up to try and knock out or fill as many holes as they possibly can before the draft. And then they're going to just try and take at least what they believe to be the best player available defensively. And then they're going to clean everything up afterwards. And I think that's what this Mike Hughes signing is. I think he's one of the few guys who, exceeded expectations coming into 2024. Under Jimmy Lake, it felt like everybody sucked. And obviously sucked his relative. Jesse Bates was still really good. AJ Terrell was still really good. Caden Ellis had a strong second half. But in terms of preseason expectations, everybody kind of either barely met expectations, barely exceeded them, or drastically did not. And Mike Hughes was the one, at least the one I can really think of, that far exceeded expectations. I mean, I crapped on that guy. I was sure that was going to be a revolving door opposite of AJ Terrell last year. And it's going to work out just fine for the Falcons as long as they don't ask him to do something he's not comfortable doing. He played a lot of zone last year where he could just keep everything in front of him and kind of come up and make tackles, which he's really good at. You ask him to get up into man, off man, press man, it's not going to work out. And while Jeff Ulbrich has his philosophy, I do think it's Raheem Morris's vision that Jeff Ulbrich is there to execute. It's not the other way around, where Jeff Ulbrich is like, all right, I've got everything. No, it's Raheem Morris, because at the end of the day, it is Raheem Morris's neck on the line. So I think the idea of re-signing him to that deal is clear. We're going to play a very similar style of defense, at least coverage-wise in terms of zone versus man.
Yeah, I mean, experience there. I definitely don't think it takes you out of the running for any corners that you could potentially find in a trade. Or
I don't think any move. Well, I guess that's not
linebacker.
True. Linebacker's probably off the board.
Yeah. I think you've cleared linebacker, but edge rusher and cornerback, I mean, those to me, if they're not 1 and 2, they're 1 and 3, and we'll get into some of those other needs later. But they're right up there with, hey, if Will Johnson's sitting there with the 15th pick and he's the best player, I mean, this is a no-brainer, guys. I know you need an edge rusher, but there is still a sense of, all right, positional need and best player available is how you attack this draft. And you have put huge positional needs at quarterback, long-term, short-term, everything, and also obviously edge rusher. So I don't think it takes out either thing. Yes, it alleviates the huge concerns that you had going into the offseason and allows you to be flexible with, we don't need to draft a cornerback with the 15th pick. We don't necessarily need to draft an edge rusher with the 15th pick, but we still probably need one of those positions. Like one of those is the top thing. And if you got a really good player at one of those positions, that's going to be the pick. And then moving on to the defensive tackle. I think that's the one other area outside of cornerback with Grady Jarrett gone, and we don't know what happens to David Onyemata yet. I think those 3 positions right there are the positions that they still have to be addressed pretty heavily before the start of the season.
Yeah, I think you could take your pick 1 through 4, cornerback, edge, center, D tackle, whatever you want to be. And the only reason safety, and you could, all 5 of those need a starter, like a starting caliber player, because, you need a nickel, you need a starting safety, maybe that's Helms, and maybe Phillips is your slot even though people are crazy to think he can play the slot. He can't. It was a horror show. And D tackle, you could say Ruka Roro and Brandon Dorless, but maybe some experience wouldn't hurt. Again, I could see both sides of the coin. Rook traded it up for him. Second and third round pick is what that guy cost you. It's time to see what you got. Sink or swim, kid. And center, Ryan Newzeal. He's not back with the team yet, though the Falcons have that kind of, he's a restricted free agent, so he is not open to sign with any other team. The Falcons can have him back if they want. And safety, I think I said DeMarco Helms. So you have options at every single one of those positions. Inspiring, Braylon Trice, Arnold Ebiketie. All right, Braylon Trice coming off an ACL injury. First of all, he was already a third-round pick. So temper expectations. And he's coming off of an ACL. So, there are uninspiring options. Suffice to say, we need starters at every single one of those.
Yeah.
At least competition.
Yeah. I mean, I think 3, cornerback, defensive tackle, and edge rusher, you need starters. You need at least a proven commodity at defensive tackle. Even if you believe in Rook, you can't just go in there with that little depth. You need a proven guy that has at least started games in this league.
Well,
if Rook takes over, okay,
you're right in a certain sense, but if you want to boil it down to draft capital wise, what have the Falcons spent where? You would say we don't need a defensive tackle because we spent a second round pick on Rook. We don't need an edge rusher because we spent a second round on Arnold Ebiketie. Where you haven't spent any of the draft capital is at center because Drew Dolman's gone. It's at safety because DeMarco Helms is a 7th round pick. It's at nickelback because Clark Phillips is a 5th round pick, I believe. So you're right. I agree with you because those are more important positions. But also, if you're from the Falcons standpoint and you believe in what you've done in the draft, they might see it from a different point of view.
Do the Falcons even believe what they've done?
I don't know. I mean, I'm just telling you, second round picks, they aren't necessary.
I think even if you have Rook, you still need a third defensive tackle that has proven experience in this league. You can't sit here and tell me Brandon Dorless is going to be your third defensive tackle going into this season. I mean, maybe you think Zach Harrison can go play a lot of interior.
That's a guy a lot of people forget about.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you think that. I mean, listen, I can't tell you exactly what the Falcons are thinking. We'll know a lot more based on their moves in free agency and the draft. But you're right. It really boils down to whether you think they need starters or depth. All 5 of those positions need players.
Right.
There is absolutely no
competition more than anything.
Yeah. I think Helms could be significant. I mean, listen, you got
he's coming off a devastating injury as well, though. So,
but you got rid of Richie Grant. You can't really be worse than Richie Grant. So, so there are some places where you got some addition by subtraction. Maybe Justin Simmons wants to come back on a short one year deal, like you saw. Maybe he's better in Jeff Ulbricht's scheme. I mean, like you said, another guy that under Jimmy Lake just seemed to forget how to play football, and that was just a trend. And that's what we said. How big is that impact going to be coming into this season? Because maybe Jeff Ulbricht looks at Ruka Roro, watched his tape, and said, "Hey, man, I can make something out of that." He sees the edge rusher depth. He's like, I can make something out of that. Mike Hughes, AJ Terrell, good enough for me. And then we just go out there and sign a safety and call it a day, or Malachi Starks in the draft and call it a day. I don't know what they are thinking. But from my perspective and what I've seen from the Falcons defense and how these small deals typically work out, they're not these resounding what a find. We found a 10-sack guy. What a found. We found a premier number 1 corner to pair with AJ Terrell. Usually these guys are underwhelming in a lot of aspects. And if that's the case again, you've got a lot of holes to fill.
Yeah, I think, in the big grand scheme of things, the Falcons defense last year was horrible. It was a horror show. We were still 6-3. We still had a chance to make the playoffs with Kirk Cousins playing like a geriatric, you-know-what. You just fine-tune the defense. It doesn't have to be great. Average is fine. Jimmy Lake probably had no business in this league. That's fine. Jeff Ulbrich certainly does have a place in this league. Michael Penix just doesn't play like a complete goofball. And, this division is once again winnable. And we're not talking about winning a Super Bowl. We're talking about, at least for Falcons fans, is building things the right way. And Terry Fontenot might not have that luxury because we talked about it yesterday. Does he have the job security? Does he not? Is he preparing to be here in 2026? Is he making moves just for 2025? We don't know. But the goal for 2025 should seriously just be to make the playoffs.
I mean, I'll tell you what. I mean, I know we finally had some
building
signings
for the future.
We talked about it yesterday, like how are they building for 2026 and beyond? Are they building for 2025? We talked about the lame duck aspect of Terry Fontenot's tenure. All of these signings, even though they finally made signings, are all small signings, one-year deal signings, nothing that's going to detract from what the Falcons are able to do in the future. So if you ask me after 2 days of free agency, and obviously things can change, it really does feel like, even though we all think Terry Fontenot's on the hot seat, he's not going gung-ho and doing crazy stuff. Like, he's not going out there and saying, we got to make the NFC Championship this year or I'm done. So I'm going to go out there and use all my resources and put us in a bind moving forward. It seems very, very clear to me through these first 2 days of free agency that the plan is 2026 and beyond.
Or he actually does just think exactly what I said, that Jimmy Lake was a complete moron. Kirk Cousins sucked for a month and a half almost. And if Michael Penix just doesn't do that, they will be where they thought they should have been last year.
Yeah, and he just thinks playoffs. We make the playoffs, I'm
good.
Safe.
And he's right.
He's right. If they make the playoffs this year, he's safe. And that's a fair point. That is definitely a fair point.